You ever hear a phrase so haunting it sticks with you long after the news cameras pack up and the crowd goes home? For me, it was 3 words. I can't breathe. That's how this story begins, and tragically, how it ends. Picture this. A warm summer evening in a small American city. Not New York, not Minneapolis, somewhere quieter, somewhere you wouldn't expect headlines to come from. A grocery store parking lot, the kind of place where families grab milk after work, where teenagers hang out near the edge of the lot. Nothing special. Until flashing red and blue lights turned it into a stage. Marcus Hill, 36 years old, father of 2, mechanic by trade, is sitting in his old Buick. He's tired, greasy hands from a double shift, and all he wants is to drive home. But 2 officers pull in behind him, sirens off, spotlights glaring. They say it's a routine check. You and I both know what that means when the driver's a black man in a mostly white neighborhood. From the very first minute, you can feel the imbalance. One officer circles the car slow, hand hovering near his holster, like Marcus is already guilty. The other leans in the window, tone sharp, words clipped, asking questions that sound less like curiosity and more like accusations. Marcus stays calm. He's done this dance before. License, registration, hands visible. He knows the rules. He knows survival depends on them. But here's the thing. Survival isn't always enough. When Marcus questions why he's being stopped, when he says, "Officer, I didn't do anything wrong," that's when the script changes. They order him out. He hesitates, not resisting, just scared. And that hesitation is all it takes. One grabs his arm, the other shoves him against the hood. Within seconds, he's on the pavement, handcuffed, a knee pressing down on his back. The officer says, "Stop resisting," though Marcus isn't fighting. He's just trying to breathe. You can hear it on a cell phone video. Shaky hands, muffled gasps, a crowd gathering. His voice breaking into desperate repetition. "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." People yell for the officers to stop. Some record, some cry out in disbelief. But the pressure doesn't ease. The longer it goes, the quieter Marcus's voice becomes until it fades altogether. His body goes limp. And in that silence, that unbearable silence, the crowd realizes what just happened. Now, if this were a Hollywood story, justice would thunder down from the heavens. But this isn't Hollywood. This is America. And the story I'm about to tell you isn't about heroes saving the day. It's about how a man died begging for air, and how a system built on power and prejudice turned his last words into an echo we still can't escape. Marcus Hill didn't wake up that morning thinking his name would end up on a hashtag, or that his last words would echo across the country. He woke up like any other day. The sun crept through the blinds of his small apartment. His kids were still asleep, and he tried not to wake them when he slipped into his work boots. He kissed his daughter on the forehead before heading out, because that's what fathers do, even when they're running late. His old Buick rattled but still started, carrying him to the auto shop where he spent more hours than he should, fixing cars for people who'd never know his name. To them, he was just the mechanic. To his kids, he was the whole world. By the time his shift ended, the sun had gone down. His body ached. His hands smelled of oil and steel, and all he wanted was a shower and a warm meal. He picked up some groceries on his way home. Milk, cereal, a pack of chicken, nothing fancy. And that's when his life took a turn. The parking lot was nearly empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and for a moment it was quiet. Then came the sound no black man ever mistakes. The crunch of police tires rolling up slow behind you, the spotlight pinning you like prey. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't breaking any law. But the officers didn't need a reason. They said, "routine check," like that phrase gave them the right to strip away his dignity. One officer tapped on the glass, voice already carrying that sharp edge, demanding his license and registration. Marcus complied, every movement exaggeratedly careful, both hands visible, narrating each step the way his father taught him when he was 15. "My license is in my wallet. I'm reaching for it now." Still, the officer's hand hovered near his weapon. People don't realize the exhaustion that comes with these encounters. It's not just the fear, it's the constant rehearsal of survival. Marcus had been stopped before. He knew how to play small, how to lower his voice, how to say, "Yes, sir," even when his blood boiled. But that night, maybe it was fatigue, maybe it was pride, maybe it was simply his humanity refusing to bow one more time. He asked the question, "Why did you stop me?" That's when everything shifted. The officer's eyes narrowed. The word attitude floated between them, unspoken but heavy. Within seconds, Marcus was ordered out of the car. He hesitated, not to resist, but to gather courage. That pause sealed his fate. They yanked open the door, grabbed his arm, shoved him against the hood. The groceries spilled. A carton of milk burst open, spreading across the asphalt like a pale shadow of what was about to happen. Phones came out. Shaky voices can be heard on the recording. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't do anything. But the officers had their script ready. "Stop resisting." That phrase, repeated like a shield, even though Marcus wasn't fighting back. They forced him to the ground, his cheek scraping pavement, his hands cuffed behind his back. A knee pressed into his spine, then into his neck. The human body isn't built for that kind of weight. Air became a luxury. His chest heaved, his voice cracked, and the words tumbled out, not once, not twice, but over and over. "I can't breathe." You can hear it on the video, desperate, pleading, less a statement and more a prayer. He said it for the officers, for the crowd, for anyone in the universe who might listen. The crowd begged too. "Get off him! He's not moving!" But the pressure never lifted. Minutes stretched like hours. Each breath grew fainter until the words dissolved into silence. His body went still. In that moment, under the cold wash of streetlights, everyone watching knew they had just seen a man die. The officers didn't flinch. They adjusted their posture, muttered about procedure, called for backup like it was business as usual. One of them even looked directly at the cameras, unbothered, as if daring the world to challenge his authority. That's how Marcus Hill's story truly began. Not in the apartment where his kids waited for him, not in the garage where he worked his hands raw, but in that parking lot where a man begging for breath was treated as disposable. The truth is, those 3 words weren't just Marcus's last. They were a mirror held up to a country that keeps hearing them over and over and still pretends not to understand. When Marcus's body went limp, the night itself seemed to stop breathing with him. The crowd that had gathered, a dozen at first, then more, fell into a stunned silence. You could hear a soda can rolling across the pavement, the hiss of a car engine idling nearby, someone crying softly into their phone. For a few seconds, nobody knew what to do, and then the shouting began. "Check his pulse!" one woman screamed, her voice breaking. A younger man stepped closer, holding up his hands. "Let me help him. I know CPR." But the officers pushed him back, one hand on his chest, the other gripping the holster like he was the threat, not the dying man on the ground. The cell phone video kept rolling. You can hear the bystanders yelling. You can see the flashing lights painting everyone in harsh reds and blues. The officer's knee still pressing down long after it needed to. Marcus's chest no longer moving. People begged. "Please, he's not breathing. Get off him." One officer finally checked his wrist as if to prove a point. Then coldly, he muttered, "He's fine." But Marcus wasn't fine. He was gone, and the whole world was about to see it. It started with one teenager standing a few feet away, phone trembling in her hands. She uploaded the video that night, captioning it with the words she heard over and over, "I can't breathe." By morning, the clip had already been shared thousands of times. By lunchtime, it was everywhere. On Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, passed from phone to phone like a secret too powerful to keep quiet. People recognized what they saw. They'd seen it before. Different city, different name, same story. Eric Garner, George Floyd, now Marcus Hill. Same words, same outcome, same haunting silence after. The hashtags started trending. I can't breathe. Justice for Marcus. At Marcus's apartment, his sister Dana saw it on her phone before the police even called. She collapsed onto the couch, shaking, the milk her brother had bought still sitting warm in a bag by the door. His children woke up to the sound of her sobbing. They didn't understand at first. How could they? Their father had left for groceries and never came back. By midday, protesters were already gathering in front of City Hall. Cardboard signs slapped together in a rush, faces wet with tears and anger. Reporters showed up, microphones shoved into hands, asking the same tired questions. How do you feel? What do you want to see happen? As if the answers weren't obvious. The police department released a statement by evening. It read like every statement before it. The suspect resisted arrest. Officers followed procedure. An investigation is underway. Not a single word about the video. Not a single word about the fact that Marcus said he couldn't breathe until he couldn't speak at all. That's the thing about these stories. The truth doesn't just come out on its own. It has to be dragged into the light by people who refuse to stay silent. And in Marcus's case, that truth was captured in shaky footage, in muffled gasps, in the trembling voices of strangers who refused to look away. The city felt different the next day. You could feel the tension in the air, like a storm building that no one could stop. At the corner where Marcus died, people left flowers, candles, photos of him smiling with his kids. They knelt where he had fallen, whispering the same words he whispered, "I can't breathe." But behind the candles and the tears, anger was already spreading, because people knew what came next. They'd seen the playbook before. The officers would lawyer up. The department would circle the wagons. The news would dig up Marcus's old traffic tickets, maybe a juvenile record, anything to paint him as less than perfect, less than human. They would try to convince the world that he somehow deserved what happened. But the video, God, the video didn't lie. You could watch it once or 100 times and it told the same story. A man pinned, pleading for air, ignored until his body gave out. No editing could change that. No official statement could erase it. And yet, deep down, people feared it still wouldn't matter. Because how many times had America seen this story and moved on? How many times had names been chanted in the streets only to fade when the cameras left? For Marcus's family, there was no fading. His mother sat in her living room surrounded by reporters, clutching a framed photo of her son in his mechanic's uniform. "He was a good man," she whispered, voice shaking. "He worked hard. He loved his babies. He didn't deserve to die like that." The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. By nightfall, protests swelled across the city. Police lined up in riot gear, shields raised, batons ready, as if the people grieving Marcus were the danger. The chants grew louder. No justice, no peace. Say his name. And they did. Over and over. Marcus Hill, Marcus Hill, Marcus Hill. Somewhere in the crowd, the teenager who filmed the video stood with tears streaming down her face. She hadn't meant to become part of history. She just pressed record because her gut told her no one would believe it otherwise. And now, because of her, the world couldn't look away. That night, as smoke curled above the city and sirens echoed in the distance, one thing was clear. Marcus's last words weren't just a cry for help. They were a spark, a reminder, a mirror. And like every spark, they had the power to light a fire. The morning after Marcus Hill's death, the city felt like it was holding its breath. On one side, crowds were swelling, angry, loud, relentless. On the other side, the machinery of the system was already humming, quiet, efficient, practiced. Police spokesmen stood in front of cameras wearing pressed uniforms, speaking in calm, rehearsed tones. The officers involved had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Administrative leave. Paid vacation, really. That was their idea of accountability. The official report leaked within hours. It claimed Marcus had been combative, that he refused lawful orders, that the officers feared for their safety. The words fell into place like puzzle pieces designed long ago. Same phrases, different names. And right there in black and white, subject resisted arrest. But everyone who had seen the video knew the truth. Marcus wasn't resisting, he was begging. Still, the report didn't mention those words. Not once. "I can't breathe" didn't make it into the paperwork. Instead, the ink painted Marcus as a threat, a criminal, a man who brought this on himself. The district attorney's office announced a comprehensive review. They promised transparency, but anyone who'd followed stories like this knew what that meant. Delay, stall, drag it out until the streets went quiet. Behind closed doors, prosecutors and police unions met, whispering about how to frame the narrative. Was the knee on the neck a violation of policy, or was it standard restraint technique? Could they argue that Marcus had underlying health issues, maybe drugs in his system? Anything that could shift blame from the uniform to the man lying dead on the pavement. The media machine played its role too. Local news anchors described Marcus as a man with a history. They dug up an arrest from his teenage years, a shoplifting charge he'd long paid for. They flashed his mugshot instead of his family photos. They interviewed neighbors who said he mostly kept to himself. The subtext was clear. Don't see him as a father or a son or a mechanic who fixed cars to keep food on the table. See him as a record, as a statistic, as another black man who somehow deserved it. Marcus's family held a press conference, standing together in front of microphones. His mother's hands shook as she clutched the photo of her son, the one with grease stains on his work shirt and a tired smile on his face. His sister Dana tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "My brother wasn't a criminal. He wasn't resisting. He was crying for help. And they killed him." Her words pierced the silence, but already you could sense the pushback. Reporters asked, "What about his record? What about his past?" As if anything in his past excused the present. Inside the department, the officers who killed Marcus were being protected. Union lawyers advised them not to speak. Statements were carefully worded, scrubbed of any admission. It was a chaotic situation, one line read. The suspect exhibited unusual strength and resistance. They called it excited delirium, a phrase invented to explain deaths in custody, a phrase critics called junk science, but courts too often accepted. Meanwhile, the cell phone video kept playing on repeat across the country. Protesters chanted outside the courthouse. Civil rights lawyers demanded charges. Politicians tweeted thoughts and prayers while avoiding the word accountability. The divide grew sharper. On one side, the raw truth, a man begging for air. On the other, the cold paperwork of the system rewriting what everyone had seen with their own eyes. And here's the cruel irony. In America, truth doesn't always matter in a courtroom. What matters is what you can prove, what you can discredit, what you can spin. Marcus Hill's last words, recorded by a teenager on her phone, were powerful. But the question looming over the city was whether they would be enough to break through decades of shields, unions, policies, and procedures built to protect the very people who killed him. The marches didn't stop. Night after night, people filled the streets. They carried Marcus's name on cardboard signs, painted across bedsheets, scrawled in spray paint on walls. His last words became a rallying cry. "I can't breathe," echoed through downtown blocks, louder than the sirens, louder than the helicopters circling overhead. For a moment, it felt like the whole city was united, strangers walking shoulder to shoulder, anger and grief blending into something close to hope. Marcus's mother sat on the front steps of City Hall during one of those marches, surrounded by candles. She didn't chant, she didn't yell. She just held a photo of her son and stared straight ahead, her silence heavier than all the noise around her. Reporters kept snapping pictures, trying to capture something words couldn't. His kids sat with her sometimes, too young to understand why their father's name was now shouted by crowds, but old enough to feel the emptiness in their house at night. Civil rights attorneys stepped in, promising to fight the case. "This video is undeniable evidence," one lawyer declared. "We will seek full charges of murder." The crowd cheered, desperate to believe. But inside the courthouse, the air was different, stale, cautious, filled with years of precedent designed to lean one way. The officers finally appeared in court weeks later, escorted through back doors to avoid the protesters outside, their uniforms replaced with suits, their faces clean-shaven, their expressions rehearsed. They didn't look like killers. They looked like neighbors, like family men. That was the point. Jurors don't see brutality in pressed collars and polished shoes. The prosecutor laid out the charges, but not with the fire the community expected. Manslaughter, not murder. Excessive force, not intentional cruelty. To some, it felt like betrayal before the trial even began. The defense lawyers went to work fast, talking about split-second decisions, about unpredictable suspects, about officers who feared for their safety. They replayed the video again and again, not as evidence of Marcus's suffering, but as proof of their narrative. "See how he moves his arm? That's resistance. Hear the officers say stop resisting. That's protocol." They turned his pleas for air into background noise, something incidental. Marcus's sister took the stand. She told the jury about his life, his kids, his work. She spoke through tears about the groceries still sitting in the trunk when police impounded his car. "He wasn't resisting," she said, voice breaking. "He was dying." But the defense was ready. They brought up his teenage arrest, his old probation, his debt, his neighborhood. They painted him not as a victim, but as a man with a history, a man who was no stranger to police encounters. And here's the part that cuts deepest. You could see some jurors nodding, not in sympathy, but in agreement. The seed of doubt had been planted, watered, and was already taking root. Outside the courthouse, chants thundered through the streets. Inside, the fight felt smaller, suffocating, like trying to breathe through a straw. The judge limited what evidence could be shown. excluded testimony about the officer's past complaints. Irrelevant, he said. Prejudicial. The jury would not hear about the other men who'd said the same words, "I can't breathe," under the same officer's weight. The family sat there, day after day, watching the system twist the truth they lived. The cell phone video that had sparked outrage was dissected frame by frame until its meaning blurred. The crowd outside grew louder, but inside those walls, justice felt further away with every passing hour. And yet, the fight continued. Because that's what families do when they have nothing left but the truth. They stand, even when the ground is slipping under them. They keep speaking, even when the room isn't listening. They hold their loved one's name in their mouths like a shield, refusing to let it vanish into silence. But the deeper the trial went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about a system that bends itself to protect uniforms and crush those beneath them. It was about whether a video, a cry, a truth seen by millions could ever outweigh a shield polished by law and precedent. And every day that passed, the answer leaned darker. The day of the verdict, the courthouse was surrounded. Hundreds of people pressed against barricades, chanting Marcus's name, holding signs that had grown weathered from weeks in the sun. His mother sat on the front row inside, clutching the same photograph she'd carried since the first press conference. His children weren't there. Too young, too fragile. They stayed home, waiting, hoping their father's name would mean something when all this was over. The jury filed back in, eyes downcast, faces tight. Everyone leaned forward, hearts racing. For a moment, the room held a fragile hope, the kind that trembles because it's so rare. The judge cleared his throat. The foreperson stood. On the charge of manslaughter. A pause, heavy enough to crush the air. Not guilty. Gasps cut through the silence. Someone sobbed. Others cursed under their breath. The judge didn't flinch, just pressed on. On the charge of excessive force. Another pause. Not guilty. And just like that, it was over. Weeks of testimony, hours of video, nights of protest, erased in 2 words, not guilty. The officers sat still, their lawyers squeezing their shoulders like they'd just won a championship game. Marcus's family broke down. His sister collapsed against her mother, screaming, "They killed him! You saw it! They killed him!" But the judge banged his gavel, ordering silence, as if grief itself was out of order. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. The crowd erupted, not in celebration, but in rage. Chants turned into cries, cries into clashes. Police in riot gear surged forward, tear gas hissed into the air, the same uniforms that had stolen Marcus's life, now pushing back the people demanding justice for him. The city burned with the weight of betrayal. In living rooms across America, the video replayed again. Marcus pinned, pleading, his voice breaking. And then the courtroom verdict scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Officers acquitted. 2 realities played side by side, the truth everyone saw, and the lie the system upheld. Marcus's mother spoke that night on the courthouse steps, her voice raw but steady. My son begged for air. He begged for life, and they let him die. And today, this system told us his life didn't matter. Her words cracked, but she didn't cry. She had no tears left. Only silence followed, heavier than any chant. The officers walked free, protected by their badges, their union, their system. Marcus's family walked home to an empty chair at the table, groceries still unpaid for, a life cut short with no justice to mark its worth. And maybe that's the part that hurts most. Not just that Marcus died, not just that he died begging for something as basic as breath, but that in the end, the truth wasn't enough. The video wasn't enough. His words, "I can't breathe," weren't enough. The world moved on. The hashtags faded. Another story replaced his on the evening news. But for his family, for his children, for every person who lit a candle at the place he fell, the echo never stopped. I can't breathe. 3 words that should have saved him. Instead, they became a tombstone.